And so I want to lead this right now because I think this is pivotal. And we've done several multi-hour long shows, but for some reason this gets lost. And I want you to correct me if I have this wrong. So in 2017, as an example, because the narrative is Sandy Hook, you tormented the parents, you called them out by name, and you continually harassed them. From what I understand, and I have some quotes here in front of me, and I want you to tell me if I'm misquoting you, you admitted you were wrong and you apologized. And I think that's key because they still want to go after you anyway. So 2017, you talked about an epiphany you had on Father's Day. You said, forgive me, on Father's Day, I want to reach out to the parents of the slain children at the horrible tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut, and give you my sincere condolences. You said that, right?
Yes.
Okay. You also said I'd also like to reach out to any of the parents who lost a child at Newtown to invite them to contact me to open a dialogue because I think it's really essential we do that instead of letting the mainstream media misrepresent things and really try and drive this nation apart. You said that, right?
Before they sued me.
Yes, before they sued you.
What I like about that clip is just how goddamn uncomfortable Alex Jones is while Crowder is doing his impression.
Oh yeah, I was about to say that's a bold move. Give him a little credit there, but you gotta hit a homer when you do it in front of him.
Yeah, which is why I'm not doing my impression of Anna Kasparian later.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that does cut very close to something I want to show you guys a little bit later as we get closer to when Anna's coming on. But as Pink Floyd has so wisely taught us, you got to eat your meat if you want your pudding. So we have to do the meatier content first. But before we move on from that. That is worth taking a minute on because the Alex Jones thing is like the word depraved is not regularly in my vocabulary, but I think it does. I think it does apply here. And this is such a weak ass defense. So look, I'm a big free speech guy. I talk about it all the time. I'm pretty serious about it. But I'm not such an absolutist. I don't think we should have defamation laws. Mm-hmm. I don't know anybody who is. I'm sure someone somewhere has that position, but I haven't met them. I think actually I said that once on Twitter, and since it was Twitter, there was one guy who was like, me! But, I haven't met them. That's how Twitter works. But so just like on a real basic level here, so you say, or you strongly suggest, you do headlines on InfoWars with titles like, it's starting to look like that these grieving parents whose like small children have just been murdered are crisis actors who never had children, and they're part of a big conspiracy to take away the guns, which I don't know when that's coming to fruition, but whatever. They're part of that. And for years, people harass those parents. They make their lives like hell for years. And the big defense is, well, yeah, but 3 years later, I said, oh, whoops, probably got it wrong. So, no legal consequences there.
Yeah.
I think our friend Kuba has the phrase whoopsie doodle. It was like a whoopsie doodle he had, Oop.
Yeah, I mean, it's really horrendous stuff at the end of the day. Alex Jones has always been extremely fringe, and he puts out a lot of, conspiracies and things where he doesn't do very much research or have any real reason to be accusing folks of what he's accusing them of. But I mean, this one was extremely egregious because not only are you denying the life of all those children who went through that tragedy, but to basically make it seem like the parents are somehow in on it. I mean, it really does. Crossing the line puts it too lightly, right? I mean, that is purposeful. And I think a lot of folks, especially people who watch this kind of stuff, sometimes miss how big of a reach Alex Jones has had over the past 10 years. Not just him trickling down to stuff on Twitter, you seeing his clips, his actual live show, the amount of people who tune into it is a significantly large audience. And You know, when you're putting that kind of information to people, says that there's this like horrific conspiracy out there. You know, it's not too far from the mind to understand that like there is an implication there that you want people to go out against them. You know, it would go and intervene in some way or another. And just on another note, like, could you imagine, like, what kind of like olive branch is it to say to the parents of those children that you can come and sit down with Alex Jones? That's you know, like some kind of reward for the horrors that he's put you through, as if that's some kind of defense. I mean, there's a level of vanity that's pretty extreme even for Joe.
Look, I'm sorry about all the death threats and like having to move and, you know, like everything you've got, you know, on top of grieving for your child. But it's cool because at the end of the rainbow, you get to hang out with Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Not a good deal. Bad deal, as Trump says. Bad deal. Should have someone should have thought about it at the deal stage.
Exactly. Which, by the way, Andy, quick test. Do you know that what David is quoting there?
Oh, it seemed familiar, but I just I've been off in Zombieland.
Okay, so Trump said something that it was really bad, and it should have been
His
called.
syntax is so hard to get right because it's so particular to Trump brain. But he's like, yeah, it was bad. It was a bad deal, horrible deal, and it should have been. Somebody should have thought of something else in the ideas, and in the deal stage is what he said.
Yeah.
And what he's talking about there is the murdering and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi by the Saudi Arabian government.
Yeah, just the idea stage. They should have scrapped that one. I mean, kidnapping a Washington Post journalist and murdering him and cutting him up with a bone saw. Like, it's like, yeah, just the idea stage. No. Like, you know, they should have been like, no. We're going to keep brainstorming here. Like, that one wasn't good.
We did that for a couple of years on TMBS. We'd play that clip for guests and see if they could guess where that was from.
Could guess what he was talking about when he said that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yes, very bad from the deal standpoint. Exactly.
Thanks, Tom.
So, all right, I did want to move on from deranged, performatively angry conspiracy theorists to just address a completely different and unrelated subject. You guys see AOC get heckled?
I did.
You know, believe it or not, I actually had completely missed this. I'm just like, oh, it's LaRouche. I'm out.
All right. Well, yeah. Let's so set this up for us, David. Who are these people?
I mean, you've been around a bit longer than me, that you might be able to give folks a better history of LaRouche. But like for folks who like don't know who LaRouche is, I'll do my best to take you through it. I mean, LaRouche sort of starts out at a certain period of time talking a bit like a Marxist and like he's doing some kind of new synthesis. But very quickly, he starts tailing the right and effectively creates like a far right. And I'm not one of these people who uses these terminologies loosely. Like far right, fairly fascist movement that sort of sometimes would paint itself as like fighting for the workers or for revolution. But he saw the world as a fight between Platonists and Aristotelians, if I'm getting that right, Ben. Which is
just awesome to start with. Like that really explains it. Like I want to, I kind of want to break it all down now, right? Be like, okay, so Biden, Platonist or Aristotelian. Jeff Bezos played Aristotelian. Chris Smalls played Mr. Aristotelian. But that is a very reasonable way to classify everybody in the modern world. But please,
and just like I mean, like we could maybe talk more about LaRouche in a minute. I'm sure we should. But like these folks who are doing this are affiliated with a group called the Schiller Institute, if I'm getting that right, which is like a LaRouche organization. So it's not just like, oh, like these people like sometimes have praised this person. It's like, no, these people are coming out of that movement. One quick thing about LaRouche too, just like there's the far right thing. I mean, there's credible accusations about them being involved in a murder of a young Jewish man. I mean, like this isn't just like, oh, these guys have crazy ideas. They've attacked left-wing protesters before. Like, you know, goes beyond just like some people saying bad things to also like doing really horrific stuff. I bring that all up because I don't want to trivialize it by also noting some of the funnier beliefs too that you get from LaRouche. I'm no like opera expert, but there's this controversy about the way that modern opera is sung, the pitch that it's in, that LaRouche and some other like classicists like think that it's like a huge deviation from like the traditional style of this music. And like a big part of the playing has also been to like return proper pitch to opera, which I think is very funny. And they've also at times have gotten like famous opera singers like in Italy to come and like record videos in support of returning the pitch, with these Italian opera singers having no idea the group that they're like associating themselves with. And I think that like we need to find a really good Byzantine line in the sand for the left movement today to really hold on, in addition to like Green New Deal, Medicare for All. No more Traegers, like no more Traeger grills. We believe that, you know, barbecue should be done properly on a stick burner. But like, yeah, anyway, I mean, like we should play the clip, let it speak for itself. But if I were to make any preface to this, you know, like there is definitely a lot of space. Like I'm somebody who's most of the time when I'm talking about AOC, it's making the point of criticizing where she's sort of out of not in step with like the left movement. But I think it's really important to recognize where these things are coming from, because like we can make criticisms of like AOC and the squad when it comes to decisions that they've made. I think that what's being presented here is a little bit outlandish and not very fair. But like what's been frustrating about this clip, because it's been on Fox News and all this kind of stuff now, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't care where it's coming from. You know, they speak the truth. They speak the truth. It's like, no, you don't have to hand it to the far right to be anti-war. Like there is a base, any position that you can take without saying like, yeah, you know, LaRouchites are cool in my book. But anyway.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I guess to fill out a little bit of that. So Lyndon LaRouche, I guess he started out in the Communist Party way back when, and then he was a Trotskyist for a while. And then he started. It's like the National Committee of Labor Caucuses or something like that it was called, but it was like his own little front organization. And then he decided that the existing left was the big impediment to the revolution happening in like the 70s sometime. And he did this thing called Operation Mop Up, which involved actually physically attacking people in the streets. And then he went way to the right, and then he kind of sort of came back, but not really. Like, still had like a lot of very socially conservative positions, but he'd like talk about the New Deal is a good thing. And yeah, I think the original thing way back when he was still some sort of Marxist is that he decided that the revolutionary vanguard also needed to be a cultural vanguard, hence the opera stuff and all of that. And he'd also have a bunch of conspiracy theories that all involved like the Federal Reserve, like international drug dealers, and the Queen of England. Queen Elizabeth was always part of this, just to fund his own. So yeah, they're challenging here AOC on Ukraine positions, and you know, look, as you say, I've expressed public disagreement with her on some of this stuff. I wrote an article for Current Affairs that Congressional Progressives needs to do better on foreign policy. And I think there are legitimate grounds for criticism. I think, let's just play this and people can decide for themselves whether this falls into that category.
Thank you very much. Next question. you're well regulated. Thank you very much.
So the next question we received was via email. How can you empower our deaf, disabled, BIPOC youth community to get more involved in government?
Thank you. So we received this question via email, and I think it's very important. I want us to restate that question because even the way that it was submitted is important for us to understand. This question was emailed to us. And if you haven't noticed, this right here is our live streaming phone, so that folks who may have that may have accessibility needs or are of different disabilities are able to participate in our processes. So, thank you so much. And so there are so many members of our community who may be deaf, hard of hearing, or have physical disabilities that prevent them from getting all the way over here. We don't want to exclude them from participation in our public processes. So our question, Angela, was the question, how do we get young people with disabilities to become more engaged? I'm not asking you to respect me. I'm not asking anybody. All right, y'all, I'm not asking anybody here to respect me. I'm asking you to respect your neighbors. That's what I'm asking you to do. So, the question was, how could you You're not jumping ahead of the line. You are not jumping ahead of people. You're not. Sir, I can answer. I'm happy to answer your question. I'm happy. No, you gotta get in line. So many people got here and waited. I'll get to your question. I'll get to the issue last. I will get to the issue last. Because you are being rude to everybody around you. Come on, y'all. I will get to your issue. I'm not even.
All right, I feel like I'm not giving the insanity its due here. We're going to switch to a different video. I'm actually glad we started with this one because you can a little bit of context that you don't get if you get the video that's like basically filmed from right behind them.
Yeah, no, actually, you're right because it does sort of show what the vibes were like there for everyone watching.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, let's switch. And it also shows, by the way, it's a very small issue, but since this is going to come up it also shows that like they were actually trying to read another question they already got. And so what these people are actually doing is like stepping on a question from like a disabled person who couldn't ask it the other way. So, where, like, and they sort of brush that off as like being evasive. But like I said, it's not the most important thing going on here, but it is maybe worth noting. But yeah, let's switch to the other video. Here we go.
None of this matters unless there's a nuclear war, which you voted to send arms and weapons to Ukraine. Tulsi Gabbard, she's left the Democratic Party because they're okay? You originally voted, you ran as an outsider, yet you've been voting to start this war in Ukraine. You're voting to start a thermonuclear war with Russia and China. Why are you playing with the lives of American citizens? You're playing with our lives.
There will be no neighbors if there's a nuclear bomb. You voted to mobilize and send money to Ukrainian Nazis. You're a coward. You're a progressive socialist. Where are you against the war mobilization? He's telling the right truth. You have done nothing. Tulsi Gabbard has shown guts where you've shown cowardice. I believed in you, and you became the very thing you sought to fight against. That's what you've become. You are the establishment, and you are the reason why everybody will end up in a nuclear war unless you choose to stand up right now and denounce the Democratic Party. Will you do that? Yes or no? Okay, simple. Are you going to stop nuclear war? Yes or no? There is no line, because this is bullshit. None of this matters if we're all dead. None of it. You know that. Then let's take it up right now, because this is the only thing that matters. This is the only thing that matters right now. We could be in a nuclear war at any minute, and you continue to fund it. That's what's going on. Why not right now? You're the liar here. Nobody has held you accountable. That's what's happening. And it is time for you to stand up and realize that what you've been saying has been lies. Let your conscience come through for once.
Well, I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed. I was hoping for space lasers and gold standard issues, but
yeah, no, just a very normal constituent, very upset that AOC is personally starting a nuclear war.
and the third nuclear war too, I might add.
Yeah, I didn't know about the first two.
Yeah, I'm assuming World War II was one of them, but I don't know where the second one would be.
All right, so I guess I want to kick this off by asking David, are you going to stop the nuclear war? Yes or no?
I'm trying. I mean, like, look, there's two conversations that you can have in response to this, right? One is about the United States providing military aid to Ukraine, right? Yeah. And the other is like doing what they're doing, which like I think it's like, I'm not trying to make nitpicky points, but like, why, if this is just a genuine criticism of AOC, is there all this damn talk about a former congressperson, Tulsi Gabbard, former presidential candidate? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's like an op aspect to this where there has been this push over the past couple of weeks. It's sort of, I mean, it's not been just over the past couple of weeks, but Tulsi Gabbard put out her big, like, why I'm leaving the left and leaving the Democratic Party video, aloha, thing that just came out. And you've seen a lot of these figures from whatever we want to call that movement really trying to bolster up Tulsi. And I think it's important to recognize that there are some aspects of this. You know, the thing about, yeah, and please do, the thing about like the aid to Ukraine is that not getting into like a debate about whether or not we should be funding or sending any level of military aid to Ukraine. What she's being accused of is actually very mild in like the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of the political fights that are happening about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We're talking about smaller packages, mostly humanitarian, with some level of like logistical aid to like the Ukrainian military, right? Again, like if you want to have that fight, I think it's sort of beyond the purview of this conversation, but fine, right? But the thing that like AOC is behind the saber rattling around war is ludicrous, especially if you go and read, like the right wing is very split on this now, by the way, about whether or not they liked it, the war in Ukraine or not. You can find plenty of articles attacking AOC, for example, for saying that she doesn't think that the United States should just like flat out strip assets from Russian oligarchs that are held in the United States because she thinks that it might be a constitutional issue. What I'm saying is that like there's plenty of criticism of AOC, coming from people who really are wanting to ratchet up, conflict and war and the severity of it, which makes me feel when I see this like it being extremely one-sided. And I think the claim that AOC in particular is throttling us, has her foot on the gas pedal to a World War III or the third nuclear war, or whatever framing it as, is completely ludicrous. And again, like I don't want to be dismissive of people who want to have real conversations about holding left-wing like elected representatives accountable. But I'm sorry, I can't help but question the motives of folks who are doing this in support of Tulsi Gabbard, somebody who is oftentimes presented as somebody who's anti-war, but they never pay attention to what Tulsi says. Tulsi wasn't anti-war. She just thought we weren't waging the war against quote-unquote radical Islam in the most efficient way.
I mean, people, I think often forget this, but before she ran for president, I mean, it's funny now she's back on Fox News all the time, but before she ran for president, like back in the Obama years, she used, like, there was a point where she was the person who's a Democratic congresswoman who would go on Fox to get mad at President Obama for not saying the magical words radical Islamic extremism, because apparently if you said that would help it defeat it.
She just got back from a deployment with the United States military. Like, what the fuck? Like, I'm sorry. Like, that's like, it's just like what you're laying at the feet of AOC. Like, you are accelerating your claims. Like, you're saying, okay, support for an aid package here that had money. I'm not saying that's not a big issue, but it had some money that went to the Ukrainian military, right? One thing, debate that. But then you're not anti-war like Tulsi Gabbard, who's literally with the United States military right now, like doing operation. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, if you're trying to make this principled lefty argument about who's good and who's bad, I don't know.
It's very, very silly. Like, and I do think, I am somebody who, I worry a lot about escalation with Russia and the possibility of the conflict going nuclear. I think that's like a very real concern. But and I'm in favor. I think what Russia's done is inexcusable. But I'm still in favor of de-escalation and diplomacy. And I've written a lot about it, and frankly, taken a lot of flack about it. Right? I'm pretty sure there are people who think the show is being funded in rubles. Let's put it that way, right? But I think, but there's a world of difference between that, right? Saying like, we should be worried about what's going to happen if the conflict goes on. We should be looking for off ramps and way to de-escalate and negotiate to the extent that's still possible. And even saying, look, maybe you can argue that like the most recent aid package, that like maybe they should have voted against that, or at least made it conditional on, on some sort of like accompanying diplomatic moves. I think those are all reasonable arguments to have. But also, like, one, just chill. The votes on that aid package, that was not close. Let's put it that way, right? Like that was like nearly unanimous. And so I don't, it was bad enough when people were saying AOC is standing between us and healthcare. I really don't think that AOC is being consulted on, whether to, as Kanye would put it, go to DEFCON 3 with Russia. I don't think she's doing that. I think there are plenty of legitimate reasons to, she's a politician, she's got flaws. I have objections about both sort of communication strategy and sometimes votes. And I think those are absolutely discussions to have and hash out. But I also think there's something about her in particular, as opposed to other elected left-wing politicians, that seems to bring out lunatics and just get them frothing at the mouth. I don't think you have to be Sigmund Freud to, have some idea of what it might be. But also Tulsi fucking Gabbard.
Yeah, it's just that's the thing. I'm sorry, that's how you can tell that this is an op. And honestly, again, you get people who are out there. I've interacted with them on Twitter, which we know is not the best sample size for reasonable people, but they'll say things like, as I was saying earlier, oh well, somebody's saying anti-war, I support them wholeheartedly. It's like, look, there are lots of people who are arguing for de-escalation, and it's amazing which things get picked up and which things don't get picked up when we're having those conversations. But even more broadly, when it comes to the fact that this is very clearly an attempt to try to create some movement for Tulsi Gabbard's rebrand, you have to start to wonder why it is being framed in that way. I can't, even if, let's just imagine alternate universe and our comrade, Cale Brooks is in the United States Congress and is just being the number one de-escalation voice. If I were confronting an AOC for something other than this, right, over things I disagreed with her, it would take a little bit of preparation for me to think to start bringing up this other character in the conversation. And the fact that both of the folks who prepped this and went into it made a point of bringing up Tulsi Gabbard should help you understand that they knew that they were very smart in the sense that they knew that this was going to get picked up. They knew that this was going to be on Tucker Carlson, which is this entire media strategy of I don't know where to put these folks yet in the general constellation of U.S. politics, but there certainly is this kind of I don't want to call them left, but they're left adjacent in the sense of they're getting mad about things that are being written in Jacobin. They're getting mad about things that are getting written in the New Left Review, right? They're swimming in the same waters to a certain extent, and they're making a plan to make interventions. Again, if you want to talk about somebody who who's been advocating for de-escalation, why bring up Tulsi Gabbard? Why not bring up somebody like Branka Marcetic? Who's taking incredible amounts of flack, and say why not follow principled voices like him or principled voices like Chomsky, et cetera, et cetera. Again, because the accusations are outlandish that AOC has her foot on the gas pedal, leading us to nuclear annihilation, instead of the president of the United States. All these other people who are playing this game, and two, trying to launder the political career of somebody who's shown to be just a complete loser. And I'm talking about Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, or also you could bring up Noam Chomsky, or who advocated peace talks back in February is Bernie Sanders, who's actually the candidate that is,
or Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah,
Jeremy Corbyn, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I, as people may remember, recently had the bizarre experience of sharing a stage with Tulsi Gabbard. And I would say I debated Tulsi Gabbard, but I really didn't. I sort of debated some other people while she was there. She didn't really participate very much in that conversation. But leading up to it, because I thought I was going to be arguing with her more than I did, I spent a fair amount of time looking into her, and it seems like she's riding some pretty sketchy culture war trains lately, to put it mildly. And also, okay, she's anti-war. Look, she's not leaving the Democratic Party for the PSL, right?
Yeah.
She's leaving the Democratic Party for the GOP, which I've got to say is not a famously anti-war organization. So I think that this is actually we're about to to bring on Anna Kasparian in a minute, who I think called this probably earlier than anybody did. But I mean, it just seems like Tulsi Gabbard is maybe somebody who at various points advocated a few left-wing views. But if I were gonna, if I were going to go around shrilly denouncing people for failing to live up to some sort of left or progressive ideals, I think she's not the person I'd pick to contrast them with.
I'm sorry, I have no patience for this kind of stuff, because the same people who are attacking Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the squad at large because they didn't quote unquote force the vote, they turned their back on Medicare for all because it's politically expedient. And turning their backs, it's like Tulsi Gabbard, true socialist Tulsi Gabbard, who dropped Medicare for all from her presidential campaign the second she thought it was politically expedient. This is an insane double standard. It's just like, it's absolutely ridiculous to make the arguments like we're going to defend the principled lefties, the principled people. When if you are a believer in Tulsi Gabbard, if you think Tulsi Gabbard is like the vanguard of some kind of progressive democratic socialist or even just socialist, right? Like movement, look at what Tulsi Gabbard has done anytime she hits a wall. She immediately has dropped all these kind of positions that some people, praise her for and attribute toward her. And like the Medicare for all one, I mean, that's a big deal to drop that in a presidential election. I mean, you're running for the highest office in the United States government. You're basically saying like, yeah, I don't think we're going to do that this time. Like, that's a little bit different than somebody who continues to support Medicare for all saying, I don't think that we're going to be able to be successful doing some kind of last minute parliamentary move to somehow get a losing vote for Medicare for all on the floor in Congress, right? Very, very different conversations when it comes to turning your back on that platform.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is like, and the fact that people, I mean, whatever, it is such a caricature of what a leftist would be like for people to still be upset about a proposed parliamentary tactic that like was suggested to be used 2 years ago that didn't even happen. And whether you think that hypothetical parliamentary tactic was a good idea or not, right? I mean, like that. This is like, man, that is a, you think about the things that like people, had big like faction fights about in the past. You're sort of, reform versus revolution, and should socialists support World War I or not, and Trotsky, Stalin. It's like, yeah, whether some social democrats should have used one particular parliamentary tactic 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, I mean it's. Can I just say something like really broadly about this? Because like this again, I think this is predominantly still like a very online formation, but it's popping up more and more. I don't think it's enough to wield power, but like think about the way to engage it. So drop the Ukraine stuff for a second. These folks are also pushing some other things. I don't agree with like the framing, but like in the general sense of like pushing back, like the LaRouche people are pushing back against and pushing for some things that like so like I'm a big supporter of nuclear power. I think nuclear power is one of like the best technologies we have in front of us to decarbonize and to provide a future of like abundance and a good life for people, compared to the Macrons and like the people who are, there's a center left movement right now that's very happy to attach itself to environmentalists and Greens who are saying what you actually need is like austerity, what y'all need is less, and we'll give it to you, right? They're very happy to be able to rebrand austerity for the future. I bring that up to say that like a lot of these same characters who are boosting this AOC attack are making those kind of arguments, but with a lot more reactionary and nonsensical baggage, right? I'm saying all this to say that like it is important to be principled and to recognize when people who might even be sort of pushing back against figures who you might disagree with are not your friends, right? Like what the LaRouche people want for the future is not a future that I want to be living in. And even when they push back against a degrowther who I might not like, I'm not somebody who's going to be like, oh, well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend on this, because you have to realize where they are coming from. I mean, it goes back to like, should the left, which has always been a nonsensical argument, but like, should the left align itself with like anti-establishment, pro-Trump people? No. And in the same way, when you see this like LaRouche movement, which is, again, I think very marginal still, but they're getting a decent amount of media attention for how small they are.
Yeah.
You should take that to all aspects of politics.
No, for sure. And I will say this is the last thing before I bring on Anna. And if it's okay, by the way, if you could stick around for the first few minutes of Anna, there's something I want to show both of you. But last thing I think I'd say before bringing on Anna is just this, that, because I know some people will be under, it's like, okay, why are we showing this, right? Like, who cares? Like, why do we, these are obviously crazy people, right? Why is this, why is this even worth the discussion? And I think it's to push back against that precise thing that you talked about, right? Because like a lot of the defense of this, like you said, is, oh, well, I don't care who they are, right? Because they're making good points, which, I think they're sort of making an incoherent version of something that like half of it might be a good point, but like, but forget that for a second. Like, also, no, you should apply some more discernment than that, right? You shouldn't just say, like, anybody who's yelling at people who we have criticisms of is therefore, on the team or something like that. That's a horrible counterproductive way to do politics.
Alex Jones talks shit about the banks sometimes.
Yeah, Alex Jones does talk shit about the banks. And shit should be talked about the banks. Yet Alex Jones is not an ally of the left. This is not hard. And I think it's worth sort of highlighting the difference between the version of a critique that might get a lot of play and the version that makes any sense. And I think that is actually something that's worth doing and spending a minute to do. But with that said, let's bring on our good friend, Anna Kasparian. How are you doing, Anna?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know David was going to be here, so I'm even better. Good to see you, Griscom.
I'm happy to see you. I'm excited to see you this weekend.
Yeah, me too. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So since we haven't said this yet in this episode, on Sunday at doors open at 6, show starts at 7. We have the Give Them a Revolution live show. That's us, David and Matt from Left Reckoning, Jason and Kuba from This Is Revolution, and Anna, Nando Vila, Daniel Bestner, C. Derek Varn, Ryan Lake. So this is going to be really, really fun. We actually just had a big meeting, like a couple hour long meeting I had this afternoon with Matt and David and Jason to plan that out. We've got a lot of really good stuff planned for that. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to just seeing everybody.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, not to reminisce too much, but I remember the LA live show with Michael a couple years ago. It was probably one of the most fun I've ever had doing one of these things. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to LA for it. Well,
that reminds me. Well, here, let me set this up properly. And thank you so much to Joasi for the super chat. That's really appreciated. So I was, Anna, main thing we're going to talk about in a few minutes. You just did this debate with friend of the show, Dennis Prager, and in that debate, there's something that so there's this point very early on when you brought up, we showed this last week. You brought up the fact that PragerU has this tax status that like technically doesn't allow them to do political advocacy. And, they seem to do a lot of political advocacy. So what's up with that? And then, well, okay, we'll get back to that part because this is very good. But but before that, there was this wonderful thing at the beginning where you showed Dennis talking about how much he aches because leftists don't want to talk to him, and you read out some tweets from me and Sam Cedar and other people saying, no, we'd love to. And he still pretended that he was like happily surprised, that you were willing to talk to him. And you had this whole back and forth about that. But then there was this exchange, and this is what I want to keep David on for because this connects up something I want to talk about. So I just want to show this part of your conversation with Dennis Prager.
The left isn't a monolith. There's a lot of disagreement on the left. There's certainly a lot of disagreement on things that I say on this show on various issues, even when it comes to crime. I'm sure you've noticed some of the backlash I've received in that regard as well. However, I will say there is a reason why the right wing tends to be more open to having these kinds of discussions and debates, and the left wing gets a little uneasy about it. And it's because there has been this prevalence of prominent figures who identify as the left, right, or on the left, who then later start to, cozy up to right-wing figures, and then it turns out that they completely move to the right wing because they're essentially paid to do it. They're used as tools by the right wing to essentially spew right-wing talking points while purporting to still be on the left. In fact, Dave Rubin's a great example of that. Dave Rubin used to work with us. He identified as someone on the left. Yeah, go ahead.
Forgive me, Anna. Dave Rubin made a video for PragerU, Why I Left the Left.
Oh, I know.
He does not, in fact, state to the world that he's still on the left. I don't know who you have in mind, so I can only address the one name that you gave. Dave Rubin acknowledges he's not on the left.
It's interesting because if I recall correctly, you had a conversation with Dave Rubin and how incredibly important it was that he was engaging in these discussions with you, discussions with the right wing. And you stated something very specific. I actually want to go to that video and I want to get your thoughts. Maybe you can elaborate on what you meant in this video. Let's watch.
I want you to continue to say you're a liberal because you're of great use to good values.
Well, don't worry, I'm not doing it for your use of me. I'm doing it for myself.
No. It's like Christians who say to me, oh, we would love you to come to Christ, but you are so valuable to us as a Jew when you defend us Christians. And they're right. You are valuable in the best sense of the word because America needs people who are clearly liberal and to be honest, and fall into the category of kosher as gay, to say, hey, hello, the conservatives are not hate mongers. Hello, they should be heard. And maybe every so often you should read National Review or watch a PragerU video.
So, Mr. Prager, you can understand why members of the left would feel a little uneasy when these discussions take place, because usually it's a sign that someone on the left got lured in with some billionaire cash, like Dave Rubin did.
Okay. Well, that's an unfair statement. I don't accuse people on the left of having their positions because of money, and I don't think you should do that with regard to conservatives. Alan Dershowitz is not a right winger, but Alan Dershowitz has said to me, this Harvard professor who's very well known, he's lost all his friends because he defended Donald Trump in court. He didn't even vote for Donald Trump. Just merely defending his right to have a defense was enough for him to lose his friends. The assumption on the left is that if you're a conservative, you're a despicable human being. And this is a perfect example. The only reason Dave Rubin would have done it was for money. I don't know anybody on my side of the spectrum who holds their positions because of money. There's a hell of a lot more money on the left anyway.
Really?
That's awesome. Sorry.
It's like I don't accuse anyone on the left for doing it for money. Like, there's no money on the left. Like, I don't know if you.
Well, I've said this before, I think, on the show, but something I think about a lot is last September and October of last year. In October of last year, I did this debate with Charlie Kirk in Phoenix, which the contrast was amazing because a few weeks before that, I was in New York, and while I was in New York, Bhaskar Sankara, the editor of Jacobin, very nicely had showed me around the Jacobin offices, and he got some people together to have a little party on the rooftop, which was all wonderful. But here was the total financial outlay for that party. They ordered a couple of pizzas, and I think there were maybe 3 6-packs of beer that were brought to that. That was that, right? Fast forward to Phoenix, and you go in there, and the Turning Points USA building is its own building. It's not like a floor of it like the Jacobin office. It's got this giant Turning Points USA sign on it, the sliding glass door you go in, the carpets say Turning Points USA on it. The men's room, I remember, had like a Turning Points USA logo on it. They've got this like green room where some people are like offering you fruit platters and stuff, while you wait to talk to Charlie. I've got to say my anecdotal impressions don't line up with what Dennis is expressing there.
Yeah, totally. And I don't congratulate myself or toot my own horn much, but I will, in the context of this debate, in that it took a lot. Like, I just knew how this conversation was going to go. Like, I predicted it enough to have the receipts ready, and I feel like I deserve a lot of credit for that. So I will say that, right? Because these debates always play out the exact same way, right? You'll call them out on something and they just deny. And I'm like, he's going to deny this. He's going to deny that they specifically use people who self-identify as progressive or on the left as their own little political tools to spread propaganda, right? It's just the trick that we see happening over and over again. And I wish the general public, like people who want to engage with political content, were a little more privy to it, so people would stop falling for the same scam literally over and over again. But whatever. I mean, if we have to keep, revealing what the real intentions are, I'll keep doing it. But fact of the matter is, Dave Rubin, I mean, he was the perfect puppet. Like, he didn't really have any strong political ideology. He was just like, I don't know, I tried a bunch of other things that I failed at, so like, let me try to be a news person.
Well, we should give people a little bit of context here, because I know there are people who watch this, who've been watching since TNBS and whatever, know all this, but there are also people who aren't familiar with all this. So could you just indulge us for a second here? About this particular example, because you knew the guy.
Yeah, I knew. I mean, right. So I actually met Dave Rubin back in 2012. It's funny because he came right up to me while I was at work in the office. It was crunch time, and I just remember him being kind of annoying and persistent because I was like prepping the show, and we were getting closer and closer to that deadline. And he was just like, he introduced himself. Obviously, I was polite to him. And then he proceeded to tell me what a huge fan he was, loved TYT, loved the work we're doing. And he was just like, oh, I just feel like you guys are doing something so good. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff happening here. And I was like, okay, great, whatever. And like, he was angling for a job, right? And I was kind of, didn't really care if TYT has the resources to hire him, cool, whatever. But he eventually gets hired, and he was incredibly charming, very persistent in terms of like wanting to develop a friendship with me. And, I fell for it. I totally fell for it. And so he and his now husband would invite me over. We lived in the same neighborhood in West Hollywood. So I would go over like almost every weekend for dinner. And I'm actually, it's embarrassing because I think I'm a pretty good judge of character, but he really did pull a fast one on me. Like, I genuinely thought he was a good guy. But when I think back on it, he wanted to talk about his salary, like constantly. And I remember just telling him, like, hey, I get it. I mean, it's a grind. Working at TYT is a grind. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's still an independent media outlet. We can't work with like 98% of advertisers, right? So we don't really have many corporate advertisers or any advertisers, period. And if we do, it's like some progressive company that like doesn't even really have resources to like sign a contract with us that's like lucrative enough to make a difference. And so I just like try to explain it to him over and over again. And mind you, at this time, he's doing a 30-minute weekly show, and that was it. His husband would produce the entire 30 minutes. Like, Dave didn't even really know what he was talking about. He would just come in and regurgitate what was like prepared for him. But I really bought that he was like, not like a leftist, right? But in the very least, like a liberal, Yeah. And the commentary that he sometimes engaged in, like, made it clear that he found Republicans repulsive. The fact that they hated same-sex marriage, obviously he found that repulsive. And so, we just became close not based on our political views. We mostly talked about other personal stuff. And I just thought, like, he's charming. I loved his husband. I thought his husband was really smart, really talented, hard worker. TYT wanted to keep him on as a producer, even as Dave Rubin was quitting. And Dave Rubin was like super offended by that, because like when he wanted to leave, my understanding is management was like, okay, no problem. Sayonara. Have a good day. They're like, but can we keep David Janet? And he was like really upset about that. But fast forward to literally like a month after he left, all of a sudden he's like talking shit about us. And at first I think it was actually coming from a genuine place, because one thing that Dave Rubin is sincere about and absolutely believes like to his core is that Israel should be able to do whatever it wants to Palestinians, should be able to build as many illegal settlements as it wants. He thinks that Palestinians are a threat to Israelis, the existence of Israel. I remember, and this is when we were good friends still, we had an hour-long debate on the show about Israel and its treatment of Palestinians. He was the only person on the panel who sided with the Israeli government. And since I was such a close friend of his, I felt like I couldn't really engage because everyone else was like ganging up on him for good reason. And one of so the former COO of TYT was like furious at like what Dave Rubin was saying. Because at that time, this is in 2014, the number of casualties on the Palestinian side was, I mean, as is always the case when the conflict escalates, just brutal. Like hundreds and hundreds of civilians dead on the Palestinian side. And then there was like a handful of Israeli soldiers who had died in the conflict. And I remember that the Israeli military was specifically targeting like schools and hospitals, knowing full well that there were civilians and children within them. Mm-hmm. And so the COO jumps in, his name was Steve-O, jumps in and is like, okay, like, are you giving them a pass for this? So do you think it's okay for them to bomb a school, even if there's like members of Hamas using that school as like a shield or something? And he said, yes, he thinks it's totally fine. And then later he had us cut that part of the debate out of the final video. And he was adamant about it, which I thought was interesting. He then went on to like Rogan and claimed that we edit our interviews and our debates, which was the furthest thing from the truth. We just do the interviews and we post them as they are.
Unless he should know because he demanded the edit.
Exactly. But anyway, before I know it, I mean, he finally got to what his ultimate dream was, which was at the end of the day, just making a ton of money with as little work as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think the content he puts out there reflects the laziness of just the laziness of the grift as well. I mean, if you're going to be a grifter, like you got to at least come up with decent enough arguments to provide cover for your grift, but he can't even be bothered to do that. It's unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, he bought like a $5 million home in Woodland Hills, California before he had moved to Florida. You don't have the funds for a $5 million home unless you're in bed with right-wing moneyed interests. And I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah. God damn. All right. That is something else. And I would also say, like, look, I generally, most of the time, right, am somebody who, like, lightly pushes back against sort of being quick to call people grifters. I think that it's, like, wildly overused. I think probably most people with horrible views have genuinely talked themselves into them. But, like, in that video that you played, Prager's talking to Rubin. And Prager, who is, I think can only be described as a kind of gross person, as in many ways, and as this sort of very like big angry grandpa, and he is talking about how happy he is that Dave Rubin is this gay Jewish liberal who will say things that are convenient to the right wing. And Rubin is just, smiling and, whatever. And like, can we talk about those hellos?
Hello. Yeah, I know, it's super creepy. While holding that cigar. You know, he was feeling himself in that video. And what I really appreciate about Prager is how he really doesn't think anyone does their homework, right? Like he genuinely didn't think like anyone on the left would come across that video or watch it. I remember actually specifically TMBS covering it when it happened. And it was unforgettable, right? Because it was such a clear admission that Dave Rubin was being used as a tool. It was like an admission to his face. I remember laughing hysterically at like, you know, Michael Brooks making fun of Dave Rubin, you know, in the context of that clip. And yeah, I mean, I remembered it. I used it against Prager as he lied to our audience about what the reality is. It's just he's weird. He's as you guys will probably pick up on as we continue talking about the debate. There's something really creepy about him as well, and his like weird obsession with like taking American culture back to like the 1950s. And I'm not talking about the good parts of America, like the golden economic era. I'm talking about the like repressive cultural stuff, especially toward women.
Yeah, although without the without like actually paying people enough that they could have single family incomes.
Exactly.
He's basically Jabba the Hutt. I mean, he sounds like Jabba the Hutt too, but that's beside the point. But he's you know wants to. He thinks he's got all the power and sitting there and wanting to make somebody dress up in a metal bikini dance for him.
Like just really quick, if I could jump in, like you know, one thing about Prager and like the argument that he's making in that clip with Anna, where it's like, how dare you accuse anybody of like doing this kind of thing for money? You know, it's the same kind of thing that like dropping like this really silly thing we've been seeing, the MAGA communism thing, and how like wrong-headed it is. Like, it's really important for people to recognize that sometimes like things are not grassroots movements, even if they might try to present themselves as it. Like MAGA is a perfect example of this. Like just being a good Marxist here. Why is MAGA able to like become, you know, victorious in that first election and beat Hillary Clinton? It's because Trump was a very, very welcome sledgehammer to use to the regulatory state, to like attacking working people, all these kind of things. So instead of it being an actual grassroots movement, it's something that is very top-down orchestrated to present itself as grassroots. And why is it able to do that? Why can we not do something like that on the left, right? Almost because it's very, very well funded and capitalist. People in society who have a lot of power and influence are wanting this thing to succeed. And like dropping like just the politics, it's like the same thing with media. Like, have you ever seen like the Prager used website? Like, if I, you know, somebody who runs an independent channel trying to build up my things, if my graphics looked the way that they did, we would have no subscribers, right? But like, because like, they're very well funded, because there's an audience for it, because there's people who in power and influence who are pushing for it, it allows something like this that sort of presents itself and, you know, acts like it's like, oh, these are just some interesting folks who are getting together and recording videos, debunking these things, and make it seem like it's something that's organic. It's like, no, this shit is like bought and paid for from the get-go. So it's like, of course, there's a lot of money for people to jump into quote unquote independent media on the right wing because it's very well funded.
Yes. Actually, you just reminded me of something that's really been on my mind, and I'm actually terrified about what the real objective is and how it's likely to be accomplished unless people wake up to the reality. I mean, we see that faux grassroots nonsense happening at like a school board level, right? Where, you know, to someone who might, to an untrained eye, right, it might seem like, oh no, these are actually mothers within the community who are concerned that their children are urinating in a litter box in the school bathroom, right? But there's actually a lot of conservative billionaire cash bankrolling this effort to, it's not about culture. They always use culture as the way to galvanize people, to scare people, right? So all of this like anti-transgender stuff, all of this like fear mongering about litter boxes, that's meant to galvanize people. But the end goal for these billionaires is to dismantle public education in this country. They don't want their taxes going toward it. They don't want to pay their taxes, period. They hate unionized educators. And there is a full-blown assault on public education, which if you look at the way even rural communities, okay, that are typically pretty conservative feel about public schools or the access to public schools, they want to maintain public schools. They don't want to defund them. They don't want to dismantle them. This country would be absolutely devastated if we did away with public schools and public education. But that is the end goal. And like with every other issue we see in the country, Republicans are using culture war narratives to galvanize people and get them to literally destroy something that they're actually, at the end of the day, in favor of. And in this case, it's public education.
No, if I could just piggyback off that really quick, because like here in Texas, like Texas has been run by right-wing lunatics for a long time, and they've gotten their way on a lot of things. And you'd think that like in Texas, you would start to see a stronger charter school movement. But the problem is, like, it's certainly not just unique to Texas, but like because a lot of especially rural areas are like very poor, are very underinvested, like. The high school is a very important place, not just for the education of children, but it's important culturally and it's important socially. And every time somebody, one of these Republicans from Austin comes around, like, we need to do private, charter schools. They're like, well, what's that going to mean for my football team? And like, we can giggle at that a little bit, but like, it's like, it's an advantage for us. And I think you're so right, which is like why, like, I think like fighting back against these attacks, like these kind of like the litter box things and like these culture war things, because they know that they can't come to their voters and say what it is that they actually want to do, which is gut public funding. They want to create a thing. It's like, oh, well, these woke teachers are doing crazy things and they're turning your kids into Satanists and all this kind of stuff.
So both of you have referred to the litter box thing. I unfortunately do know what you're talking about, but I'd like to think that there's some people who are watching this who lead much happier lives who have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. So does one of you want to jump in and explain what this is?
I'll quickly mention it since I brought it up. So, over the last few years, especially with COVID, you have parents showing up to school board meetings to protest all sorts of things, all sorts of policies that are implemented campus-wide, like masking students to prevent the spread of COVID, vaccination mandates, things like that. But it has now kind of morphed into some of the more insane culture war narratives, including fear-mongering about the inclusion of transgender athletes in school sports. And now the latest, which actually started off as a hoax by broadly speaking, someone on the left, like to kind of poke fun at all the fear-mongering. It was this notion that schools have now started installing litter boxes to accommodate students who identify as furries or identify as animals, right? Which isn't happening. Again, it's a hoax. It's now being repeated by the likes of Joe Rogan because of course it is. And so like parents are showing up to school board meetings. There's like videos of this that are both funny, but also incredibly depressing, where parents are like terrified. They're like, oh my God, I heard about the kitty litter box in the school bathroom. And how could you do this? Like that kind of stuff. And it's just, it's a way of pitting Americans against the public education system and using like these made up boogeymen as like the catalyst for the backlash.
Because the one thing I think scared the right wing so much was when they saw those teacher strikes in Oklahoma and West Virginia. Like when they saw that, and like in quote unquote red states, which is not something I like to use as a framing, but like in places where people like don't expect much, not only was there teacher strikes, but they had mass, broad, popular support because people like teachers in this country. They support them. And I think that scared the hell out of them. And they realized, well, they can't wage war on teachers directly like that. So they have to create this, crazy culture war that I think, takes advantage of how society is moving fast on some things. And there's like genuine confusion to create these kind of fantastical stories that kids are dressing up as cats and pissing in a litter box. It's just...
And like, all it takes is, I don't know, like a second to really think it through. We're talking about the public education system, which is already so severely gutted that many schools can't even afford the basics like textbooks. But no, they're going to spend resources on not just litter boxes, but the staff necessary to maintain and clean the litter box. Like what? It's just, but anyway.
And as somebody here who actually has hung out with furries, I will say I don't ever remember any litter boxes at their parties.
Right.
They just have a regular
Investigative
bathroom
journalism.
like everybody else here, you know?
I hope that's your first question when you meet one. So, what's the pee situation here? Like. Oh, actually, no. If you have them over, right? I'm sorry. Where are my manners? I need to find a litter box.
I got one on each floor. You know, I'm good already.
Yeah, there you go. No, yeah. I mean, I think you guys are absolutely right. It's yeah, that makes me sad about Rogan. He shouldn't have more leftists on the show to set him straight about this stuff. But
or some furries,
or some furries. Either way, set them straight. But but I think that I mean, look, public education is public. It's like one of the biggest publicly owned things that we do in this country, and B, unionized in most places. So when you put that together, I mean, it makes perfect sense that it would be a major target for the right, and that so many of these things would play out there, right? That they because ultimately they want to promote charter schools, they want to privatize things, and there is this very familiar agenda, which actually does take me to now that we're actually talking about substantive things, and my agenda of just having a little bit of fun, making fun of Dave Rubin has been foiled. Don't worry, we'll do some of that in Los Angeles. But for anybody who wants more of that, but that does take me to this other really interesting exchange that you had with Prager at the end about immigration.
Well, let's first discuss the inaccuracies in your statement. Number one, there are legal means to immigrate into the United States. So, for instance, the asylum seekers who are being used as political pawns by people like Texas Governor Greg Abbott, I'm not done, or Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, they came into this country seeking asylum, meaning they are here legally, and they are awaiting a federal judge, an immigration judge, to make a decision about their asylum status. Okay, so the idea that the border is open and people are just pouring in illegally is inaccurate.
Yes, they are. No, it is accurate.
No, it's inaccurate.
Good. So this is a perfect example of where we differ, and there's no reconciling. Either you're right or I'm right. Either millions are coming in illegally, but whom you are calling legal because they're all seeking asylum. Do I hear you correctly?
We have a system in place for asylum seekers. So are you saying that we should do away with that system? And if you are saying that, then it would require members of Congress to pass legislation that reforms our immigration system. But I mean, I think you'll agree with the statement. Members of Congress have no interest in passing any legislation or engaging in any immigration reform. We have companies and businesses that are exploiting undocumented immigrants for cheap labor, and they have no recourse. That exists. But they love the theater. Members of Congress love the theater.
For the record, I spit on corporations. They are woke and they are abusive of labor at the same time. So you're not going to get any defense from me or any conservative of big corporations.
Yeah, you're not going to get any defense from Dennis Prager, his YouTube channel, which we have watched far too much of on this show, or any conservative of corporations. They have no interest in standing up for corporations.
Right. I mean, my only regret with this debate was when he said that, I should have immediately called out the faux right-wing populism that we see so often these days, especially with like Tucker Carlson pretending to, be against corporations. It's never about the way that workers are treated. It's never about, how in this system, these corporations have a profit motive and a fiduciary responsibility to return on investment to their shareholders, which means they view labor as a massive cost that they seek to cut down as much as possible, right? Like that is not what they're concerned about. The reason why Dennis Prager started that I spit on corporations argument with they're woke is because he doesn't like when a company puts out a Black Lives Matter sign in support of BLM during the protests in 2020. Like, it's all about the cultural stuff. And let's just keep it real. Even the cultural stuff that corporations engage in is done specifically as an effort to get positive PR to, at the end of the day, help their bottom line and their profits. That's it. That's all it is. But they can't handle any type of, progressive messaging from these corporations, even as they're crushing their workers and have been crushing their workers forever. I mean, it's the way the system is set up. Dennis Prager and the right wing love that system. They are defenders of that system. They are literally paid by moneyed interest to continue providing cover for that system. That's the whole point of PragerU.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whenever anybody, and look, I don't want to let the sort of identity politics stuff off the hook here. I think there is like an important point about how that stuff is so liable to being used in this way by corporations. Like that's actually a very natural fit, because it's a moralistic politics that, it's really not about, distribution of material resources or anything like that, right? It's about this kind of cultural signaling, and yeah, sure, a corporation can do that, no problem, right? That doesn't threaten their interests. So I mean, it's very easily used by them or whatever, by the CIA. Remember the cisgender millennial with generalized anxiety disorder from that that CIA commercial. Also remember she spoke Spanish, which I will say is probably a useful job asset if you work for the CIA. You're on the overthrowing leftist governments in Latin America desk. That's helpful to you. But like when somebody says they don't like woke corporations, like, okay, what's the, or like woke capital? I'll see that sometimes. Like that's like the wine track version of that. People say they object to woke capital. It's like, okay, which part do you actually object to? Is it the capital or is it the woke? I think we know the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Nike, using Colin Kaepernick in one of their campaign ads, right? They didn't do it because they want to take a strong, unprecedented stance against police brutality. They want to do it because they want to slang their shoes. And it helped. Like, that campaign was incredibly effective and profitable for Nike. But it enrages the right wing. And it's really, look, what they've done in finding a way to message against corporations, which I think Americans do feel a lot of anger toward, right? It's actually kind of genius. And that's the thing about Republicans. Like, yes, they're well-funded and that helps. But in terms of strategizing, I just think that they're way better than the left, to be quite honest with you. And they realize, okay, there's populism in the country right now. There's a lot of rage toward corporations because of the way they treat workers and how, the revenue is distributed within these corporations. But like, we can't really touch on that. So how do we craft messaging that makes it appear as though we're with them? Like, we understand their anger and their rage. And I think to some extent they've succeeded in pivoting the materialist argument away from the materialist argument toward a cultural argument, which I can't emphasize this enough. The right wing is excellent at that. The Democrats, and broadly speaking, the left, is never going to win that war, because think about how it's set up. It's set up as culture war issue. We've just manufactured it. You need to be worried about X, Y, and Z. And they, of course, use all sorts of hateful, terrible rhetoric. Well, if Democrats engage with that, the only thing they can do is scold. And that's it. Which, it's worth scolding. Don't get me wrong. It's worth condemning some of the hateful cultural rhetoric that we hear from the right wing. But you got to immediately pivot to, this is what the right wing gives you. Here's what we want to give you. And then you move the conversation back to what Americans are actually furious about, which is their economic instability, their inability to pay freaking rent, even if they have a dual income household with two people working full time. Like, it is insane. People are rightfully upset, angry, and they want change. But I think the right wing succeeds in distracting them with the culture war narratives, and the Democrats don't help, because rather than focus on the economic insecurity and rather than be principled on their messaging the way Bernie Sanders is, for instance, they just let Republicans frame the argument and they engage in that cultural argument time and time again. And that's it, nothing more.
Like when it comes to corporate power too, like, not that we need to underline how just hypocritical they are. Like, here's an example. So we all experienced a period of time very recently. Looks like we're going to have another episode of it again, of extremely high gas prices in the United States of America, right? And obviously, while we need to be pushing for, renewable sources of energy, et cetera, in the current setup, when gas prices go up, it hurts everyday people, working people. The right wing spent months attacking Biden. Biden's gone soft on the climate. Biden is preventing us from drilling. When you look at what American oil companies were doing when gas prices were high, it's crazy. Like, I had a suspicion, but I wrote a piece for Jacobin and I had to comb through the numbers. The amount of capital that big major oil companies like Exxon allocated into exploration and new drilling sites was so marginal. It was almost, you couldn't even see it on the graph compared to what they were doing to their shareholders. They gave them so much money when gas prices were high because they knew, one, it's good for us in the short term to keep the gas prices high because we get this windfall capital. And two, after COVID, when you saw the plummeting gas prices, it was a good moment to sort of remind shareholders why it's a good bet to invest in ExxonMobil. I bring this up to say that, like, if you want to wage war on capitalist corporations, why not wage war on ExxonMobil? Like, if you are a climate denial guy like Prager, right? It's like, we need to be drilling more. Why not wage war on Exxon? Why is Exxon not taking advantage of all the permits that Biden was giving them during that period of time to explore more in the Permian Basin? They weren't in the Permian Basin. They weren't interested in doing so because at the end of the day, profits come at the, at the expense of everything else. I'm just saying that to just say, like, even on something that they like on a culture war stance, like they like to be pro oil versus other forms of energy, they can't even do that well when they have the opportunity, to come at some of the hypocrisy and problems of corporate power. Which again, I don't think this audience needs a reminder of why the right wing is full of shit when they start saying that they're anti-corporation. But here was a very clear example of corporate power actively harming people in the way that most Americans are going to experience that criticism. They're going to think anyone who's arguing for more gas drilling is right wing. Like, you could do that and be a populist right winger, but they didn't. They were mad at Disney because they had people of color playing stormtroopers or whatever the hell.
Which would be a funny one because you wouldn't be able to see them. But yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like I do think it is worth making some of these points because I know, look, I'm under no illusion that we have some big right wing audience that that doesn't already agree with this. But I do think one of the things the show is good for is to help arm people with things to say, when the stuff comes up. And I think that, look, I mean, just run down the list. I mean, your example is certainly a good one, but also okay. So look, he spits on corporations. He has nothing good to say about corporations. He doesn't want to defend corporations. Okay. So does he want to make it easier for workers who work at those corporations to organize unions? Does he want to raise the minimum wage? That'd be bad for this corporation's bottom line. Does he want to give everybody health care so people who worked at those places, are more able to stand up to their boss without worrying about, where their family's health care is coming from? No, he doesn't want to do any of that stuff.
No. In fact, later, at some point during the debate, I don't know if you're going to show this part, but let me just quickly reference it. We were talking about, he has this obsession with women staying home and foregoing a career. Yeah, because it's related to this in a way. So if you want to go to that clip, okay, let's
do this. We do have that clip. So
I want to move on to other statements you've made, other issues. You do focus on culture war related issues, your distaste, hatred for secularism. I want to start off without putting words in your mouth. I'm going to show a video of something you said just yesterday on the Dennis Prager show that I thought was fascinating. So let's take a look at that and we'll discuss.
The computer sticker phenomenon is crazy. It was actually one of the biggest shocks.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
On your computer right here, people, instead of just having a blank back,
I see.
they would
have
put
messages.
Yes. It would either
be.
And
what was the common message?
I heart women, or just the female sign, the circle and the arrow.
I heart women on a woman's computer?
Yes.
All of this is proof to me that women need men. These women are manless. They may have hookups, but they're manless. And they might have been fatherless too. Ending with my generation, I would say ending with the baby boomers, but certainly through then, a young woman thought a lot about, do I have a boyfriend?
Mm-hmm.
What will my wedding be like? What will I wear? Who will be there? Who will the guy be? That I believe is healthy and normal for a young woman.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing. That has been knocked out by the feminist left. And if you think about it, you're a weak female.
So fascinating statements there. You seem to believe that women who love themselves, who love women, who feel confident about being women, tend to be manless and lonely. Do you genuinely think that? Do you think I'm manless and lonely? I think women rock.
I said that in general, women need men, and I've said 1,000 times that in general, men need women. The fact that that's controversial is a statement about what's happened to our culture.
But you got triggered by a story about women who have laptop stickers that just say positive things about women.
Yeah.
I love the fact that he can't pass the Bechdel test. Like women in his mind should not be able to pass the Bechdel test. For those of you who don't know, Bechdel test was created by cartoonist. First name I'm blanking on right now. Allison, yeah, that sounds right. Alison Bechdel. Where basically, if you're watching a thing of media and the women only are on there discussing like their relationship as is to a man, then it's not really a good representation of women. And so that raises the bar of like what, like such a low bar right there. And he's just like, yeah, no. It's everything that fails the Bechdel test. That is how women think.
Well, he's just very concerned because they're sad and manless,
right.
Probably fatherless.
Yeah, right. They've got daddy issues for sure. By the way, I mean, I didn't even know where he was coming at that from, right? So, I mean, when I think about my experience in college and anyone that has like gender-related stickers on their laptop, it's usually something about like supporting other women. Like, I don't know if he was thinking of it as like women who love other women in a sexual way. I don't know what was going through his mind,
well,
right?
It sounded like it at first because he was like, these are women's laptops? Right. I love women.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure his homophobia like played a role in some of what he was saying there. But to me, my mind immediately went to, especially after hearing him talk about like, oh, back in my day, well, the good old days, women would toil away thinking about their potential boyfriends and partners, and they didn't care about anything else. Like, I just thought about how obsessed he is with women staying home, having babies, like catering to their husbands, like just the traditional like 1950s nuclear household. Like it seems like based on everything I've seen from him, he just longs for those days. And I brought up the point that, listen, if women want to stay home and be homemakers, I mean, more power to them. I don't look down at them. I don't disrespect them. I think that's actually, just being completely honest, staying home and raising kids, in my opinion, is literally the hardest job in the world. I couldn't do it. I would lose my mind. That's why I don't do it. So I have a lot of respect for those women, but he seems to think that the reason why those days are gone is solely due to cultural changes.
Exactly.
And so I brought up, no, the whole point of feminism is to create a situation, to create a culture in which Women get to make decisions about what they do with their lives. So if they want to be homemakers, they should be able to do that. But you can't do that in today's economy. Literally, like both partners, like both members of a partnership have to work in order to make ends meet. And the reason why I bring that part of the conversation up is because he just said, I disagree, and like provided no argument for why he disagrees. And so going back to the whole thing about corporations, you know, underpaying workers and all of that, no, he's totally on board for that. In fact, he completely denies that that's even a problem.
No, absolutely. And yeah, this always drives me crazy because, look, I am somebody who, I mean, I guess at this point, in terms of income, I'm like mostly a journalist, but like also an adjunct professor. I live in a big city, whatever. I have like the most cookie cutter socially liberal views imaginable. Like nothing I have to say about that is interesting or unexpected given, you know, like, you know, who I am and background and all that stuff, right? I mean, I think any kind of anti-discrimination, anything, whatever, like I think what you think, I think. But also, I love that you made that point because this is such a bait and switch with all of this shit, right? Like he, you know, like you know, we were talking earlier about, you know, whatever, woke capital, woke corporations. You know, I wrote this article a couple weeks ago for that was about why you know, basically about possible 2024 candidates, and I'm making the, you know, the case for Bernie. It was actually published in a right-wing magazine because like the editors were writing the sort of case for Trump, and so I was responding to it. And in the article, one of the points I made, and this is actually not sure what the legal name of this dude is, but it's the person who does the soaked on left on Twitter who like pointed it out to me initially. That in the article, one of the points I made is like, look, the funny thing about this is like if you look at like complaints about woke corporations or whatever, like one of the examples they love is James Damore, the guy who's fired from Google because he wrote this memo that said like, oh, you know, there are fewer women in tech because women are, you know, I don't know, innately biologically not disposed to tech or some stupid shit like that, and he was fired. Okay, when all that was litigated, that was when Trump was president, and so the National Labor Relations Board was full of all these like hardcore right-wing union busters who were so anti-worker that they sided with Google against James Damore. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly.
I did not know about that follow-up. That's incredible. Well, I mean, it's unsurprising, but I love that you followed up on that.
Yeah, because they don't want to weaken the ability of employers to fire people. Like that's so it makes perfect sense from their perspective. And it's the same thing here. That like you have in like, okay, look, I think and there was a point, we don't have this clip, there was a point in your debate when he was like insisting that if you said in a college class that like what you really cared about in life was as like a young woman, you were telling, you know, was like finding you know, husband, having kids or whatever. And I think that like people would have a big problem with it. And you sort of said, I don't really think most people care that much about this. I will say, like you know, I teach college students. I actually don't think, I mean, yeah, sure. If you said it like Dennis Prager, people would think you were a weirdo, but like if you express the underlying sentiment, right? You said, I don't really care that much about, you know, work stuff. What I care about most in life is relationships and the human connections. And, you know, I really want to have kids. I don't think anybody would blink an eye at that. I don't think anybody would have the slightest problem with it. That's a like 99.999% of, you know, normal college students in most places would be totally fine with that. But like also, like, okay, I actually do think, I agree with you. I think that like wanting to stay home and take care of kids, like, you know, full time, I think is a completely valid life choice. And I don't, you know, I prefer to have a society, you know, see above where there wasn't any like gender-based pressure on anybody in particular to make that choice, right? But like, if anybody, right, you know, male, female wants to do that, great. I think like a decent society should like facilitate that as an option, you know, for people, should should give people the ability to do it. So I guess Dennis and I agree. So my question for him would be, okay, great. What's the plan to raise wages to the point where you could actually raise kids on a single income?
There's no plan. There's no proposed policy. Again, everything boils down to culture for them, even if the argument they're making makes no sense. And like part of it is, I don't think that Dennis Prager is really at all connected or attached to reality, because he provided, by the way, just quickly going back to his weird anecdote about young women in a college physics class declaring that they want to be stay-at-home moms. He couldn't provide any data. Like I was like, I mean, where do you get that from? Like, what are you citing? What are you basing that on? He's like, I live in reality. And I was like, okay, so do I. But if we really take a step back and look at just the whole situation, like I still teach, I'm taking a break now, but like not too long ago, I was teaching a journalism class at a university. I'm more connected to what's going on culturally on a college campus than 74-year-old Dennis freaking Prager, who couldn't provide a shred of evidence to back up the argument that he was making.
He actually runs a university.
Well, right. Good. Fair point. But anyway, he just wants to boil everything down to it's our culture. And I think he's probably doing well for himself and doesn't really know what it's like for the average American, right? The average person who's just like literally working a full-time job and still doesn't make enough money to pay rent, just to pay rent. He doesn't know what that's like. And so he thinks he could continue using this like culture-based argument in response to everything that's happening in the country. And it just doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. And I don't understand how anyone who might buy into his brand of politics gets bamboozled by this, because this economic system that's crushing people doesn't just impact the left, it impacts the right as well. So how do you listen to that argument, especially like as a woman who might want to stay at home to raise her kids? How do you listen to him say that and then argue that like, no, you don't need a dual income household. Like you could totally survive with one person earning money. How do you buy that? I don't get it. It's weird.
Yeah, and by the way, I really like what Silver Harlow says in the chat, that I mean, look, it's not just that culture just happens spontaneously somehow, and then like material reality just adjusts itself to it. I mean, like part of the reason that, to the extent that I mean, obviously, depending on who you were and all that is more complicated, but to the extent that there were more people who could raise kids on a single income in, the white picket fence home or whatever we're imagining in the 50s. In many cases, it was because of industrial unions that were built with like sit-down strikes in Israeli militant confrontations in the 30s that like actually gave people those incomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything he's against. So, I think that, the one area, and I've said this on the show before, where, because covering the kind of stuff that we cover every day, it's so demoralizing and it makes you feel like, nah, it's hopeless. Like, but the one thing that I am noticing is just like the momentum behind people unionizing and organizing their workplace, how unstoppable workers at Starbucks have been and how undeterred they are, even with all of these retaliatory measures that have been implemented against them. That gives me hope, right? And I think the only way the left wins is if we remain principled and we like really take a page out of Bernie's book. If we could multiply Bernie and Bernie's messaging on the left and not get distracted by the infighting and some of the cultural stuff. Again, condemn, obviously, the discriminatory garbage that comes from the right wing. I'm not discounting that. But we have to stay principled. And any opportunity we have to force the right wing to reveal who they really are when it comes to these economic policies and these bread and butter policies. We got to take those opportunities and we got to amplify, again, who they really are. Otherwise, they're going to continue getting away with the tricky messaging that they're so good at.
You know, just on family values for a quick second, like there are some, you know, very brave folks in Alabama who have been on strike for going on 17 months now at Warrior Met Coal. And, you know, we just, you know, I've been trying to amplify. They're asking for people to help donate so that they can get toys for their children for this upcoming Christmas, because it's now the second Christmas that families have been without an income. You want to talk about family income stuff? Talk about the nasty extractive corporations that are coming into Bessemer, Alabama, taking that money into Wall Street and New York City to fund the lifestyles of extremely wealthy, privileged folks who are taking away from those people. And of course, like, you get silence from these right wingers. And I think that, like, you do this, Anna, Ben does this, and like, just like as a broader left, like, we have to get a little bit better at making these points that, like, the policies, the ideas that the right wing promotes are inherently anti-human, they're anti-worker, but they're also anti-family. Because if you're creating situations where people are having to take a risk like these folks have been taking to fight for fair wages, I mean, just like really quick recap, the workers there voted to take a temporary pay cut when the mine was not making as much money a few years back. The mine gets bought out by, like, primarily New York City, like, financial firms. And then has its most profitable years ever. And when those workers said, hey, time for y'all to match the bargain that we struck, they refused to, right? And you just get crickets from the right wings of something that's material. Like, this is so much more material of a fight, like something that you can actually do that can immediately improve family households into place, versus getting mad about what people are watching on TV or getting mad about what laptop stickers undergrads have on their computer, right? And again, it's like, I don't think our audience needs to be instructed too much on how hypocritical the right wing is, but we should also be able to make these arguments that, like, these things hurt families very much. And, like, we actually are the group of people who are saying we want families to be able to live a thriving life. We want families to be able to stay together. We don't want families to have to be struggling. Then I think sometimes on the left, there is a tendency to sort of shy away from ever using that kind of language about these things, which I think is unfortunate because it's a slam dunk.
Totally. I totally agree with you. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking about, like, my own childhood, and, you know, there were a lot of tough years. And I remember, my parents are going to kill me for even disclosing this, but it is what it is. I mean, they were desperate. At one point, like, my mom had to go to work, right? Like, my dad, he had a great unionized welding job that was shipped abroad, offshored. And so he ended up working as a handyman for a while. And that just, he wasn't making enough money to, like, be able to, like, sustain our family and all the finances and all that. So my mom started working as a substitute teacher's aide within the LAUSD. This is when I was 8 years old. My brother was 5. And obviously, like, they can't afford childcare. So, like, my mom in the summer left us home alone and was like, I remember her telling me, like, anyone knocks at the door, you don't open the door. You guys have to be quiet. Like, I remember being terrified because I'm like, and I remember her telling me, if they find out that I left you guys home alone, they're going to take you away from us. And I was terrified, like, absolutely scared. And I remember that's what my summers were like when I was really, really young as 8 years old. And I look back at my childhood, and even with all those tough things, my parents loved us and just cared for us so much that, like, I have fond memories of my childhood. But I think about all those children out there who have similar experiences and far worse because of the destructive policies and the destructive exploitation that the right wing in this country has not only provided cover for, but has actively fought to implement, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I think that cannot be said enough times, right? That people who, and, like, you know, all of those trends that, like, some cultural conservatives love to obsess about people waiting longer to get married, waiting longer to have kids, all that stuff. Feminism didn't do that. Gay people being able to get married certainly didn't do that.
Wait, you think there's an economic reason for that, Ben? It's not because we're too sexually loose these days.
It's avocado toast.
Yeah.
It's that is making people sterile.
Yeah. It could be that, or it could be that we live in a neoliberal gig economy hellscape where people are increasingly precarious and don't feel like they can afford to.
I'm sorry, like this, my life. Like I've been with my my fiance now for 10 years. 10 years. I never felt comfortable doing the next move because it's like for me it seems sort of ludicrous to be able to take that next step in my life. Before I was able to shore up, basic things like paying bills, right? I'm just saying, like, for personal experience, I know I'm not the only one. Like, a lot of people are holding off on these things because they're frightened about taking that next step in life when they're so precarious, when life is so precarious for people. I mean, it's, yeah.
No, absolutely. And I guess just thinking about note to end the main show on, I love what Anna said earlier about the Starbucks workers, and I think it is good to inject a little note of hope into this stuff since. Well, I mean, actually, we were talking about this later. We were just chatting a little bit after the planning meeting for the live show, and David said something I think was exactly right, and we're saying it exactly the way he said it, which is that like the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2020 was an attempt at a kind of Hail Mary to sort of skip a bunch of steps that other successful left movements have had to go through, and it's certainly worth trying. But given its defeat, this is a long, slow process because you're just not going to be able to win the kind of political victories that we need to win in order to reverse all of this stuff if there's no organized working class. And getting to the point where you do have an organized working class is very difficult, and it's a very long road. But also, I can remember actually when I was in LA last December having an argument with somebody whose name people would know, but I'm not gonna embarrass him by naming him out at a bar. Where this person said, like at that point, this is last December, there was one unionized Starbucks. He was like, yeah, it doesn't really mean anything, it's one, whatever. I was like, no, this is great. This is the first unionized Starbucks. That's huge. And now actually, I don't even know. Do you guys know what the number is?
Not
there
off
are
the top
like
of my
hundreds, actually, hundreds of stores. It's crazy and awesome, and I love it. So, I love reading Jonah Furman's reporting on anything related to organized labor. He does such a great job, and so I read his work a lot when I'm feeling down and depressed about what's going on. The stuff that typically sucks up all the attention in the news cycle, which is usually demoralizing and makes you want to give up, but pay attention to those workers, because while all the focus is on those big national stories that are pretty terrible, on the ground, workers are aware of what's going on. And again, even with all of the backlash and retaliation they're seeing from their managers and executives at Starbucks, they're undeterred. They keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to discount Biden's NLRB. Like, I have so many criticisms of Biden, but to give you credit, Ben, you were making this point, while debating like Breonna Joy Gray over whether or not it makes sense to vote for Biden. You're like, he's probably going to have a better NLRB, and that's huge. That could make a big difference. And you were right about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, to give credit where credit's due for that, I was reading Paul Prescott, who was making this point in Jacobin that look, I mean, the Obama administration sucked. In many ways, it sucked much more than what we've got now. I mean, free trade agreements, et cetera, drone war, whatever. Like everybody here knows all of this, right? But even there in NLRB, if you compare it to the Trump one, was way better, because just given what the Republican Party institutionally is, like on a much deeper level than the sort of surface disagreements, between like your Trumps and your Liz Cheney's or whoever, right? Like below all of that, right? What the Republican Party institutionally is such that their donors, their networks will not let them get away with not appointing hardcore union busters to the NLRB. And, none of that is to say like Biden has been great or whatever. Clearly not, right? But I mean, like, just as a, that always seemed like the sort of clearest thing to me, like that and the judges, right? And I think honestly, I mean, it's a little bit, even in parts left, like you were kind of alluding to, Anna, it can be an uncomfortable conversation. But I remember Matt Leck saying this a little while ago, that he's like, look, I've seen a lot of people on Twitter doubt whether who's on the NLRB matters, but I've never talked to a union organizer who's confused about that. Like, that does matter. And, even if in many ways, right, it's still the same old mediocre corporate Democrats, like just in terms of long-term horizons for the kind of movement that we need. I think that's something that we need to keep our eye on, and yeah, I would do it again, right? Hold my nose in my swing state. That makes perfect sense to me. And I know people. I think both a lot of liberals and a lot of sort of. God, I remember like Nico House. I remember having a debate with him about this. If anybody remembers that dude. A lot of people like that. Also had one with him about Tulsi Gabbard. So
nice.
Just gonna say, I think history has rendered a verdict on that one. But
definitely.
But like, I think both a lot of liberals and a lot of like people like that share in common. They sort of over moralize this question of like what people do in the voting booth and like turning it into this like big, like almost some sort of like weird personal spiritual thing or whatever. It's like, no, it's not that deep, right? I mean, just like, this is a tactical question. Treat it that way.
100%.
They believe in that process so much more than we do, which is amazing. Like for the things that they accuse us of, they really believe that is like the difference maker. That is like doing politics. Where from my perspective, it's like that is just like the very beginning, if anything, of engaging in political work. I don't know, like all those people who fed like the forced to vote people, etc. Like they really believe in this process in a way that's quite idealistic, which is I don't know, amazing to me.
If we just force the vote with Medicare for all right now, the sun would be out more, food would taste better, it'd be amazing. And I'm very, very angry that this thing that would have been on C-SPAN for 10 minutes one day didn't happen. And I'm going to just continue to be angry about that until the end of time. Thank you for the super chat, Ivan. High school economics teacher here that warms my heart. Send me a DM and I'll direct you what I can on that. I am really looking forward to seeing both of you guys in Los Angeles in 6 days. That's amazing. This can be so much fun. I've been thinking about it, planning it. I've been watching bits and pieces of some of the old TNBS live shows. And yeah, really excited about this.
It's going to be awesome. Can't wait.
Yeah, don't forget, y'all, October 23rd. And, I'm turning 30 the next day. So, like, let's,
You're turning 30? Oh, my God. What the? I can't believe how young you are. Jesus Christ. Wow.
Let me say goodbye to my 20s in a nice way with everybody. Y'all come join us in Los Angeles. I don't know if that's a compliment or if I look very old.
Oh, it's a compliment. Wow. You're just, you seem, you look young. It's not about your looks. It's just like, you're so smart. Like,
I'm just
wow.
kidding.
Very impressive.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, but like really, it's gonna be like I don't want to we should keep everything a surprise, but like we went through the show today, me, Jason, Matt, and Ben, and I've not been as excited, at least from the outline of the show, for a show that we've done in a long while. So I'm really looking forward to doing that with everybody.
All right. Thank you both so much. I'm very psyched about this. Yeah, left is best.
Left is best. Thanks, guys.